Derek, can you please check what happened to Dr. Russell?
Yeah.
Have you admitted everyone? Is everyone in?
We've admitted everyone. I'll just check on Dr. Russell.
Okay, Dr. Russell is asking what is the ID number? How did he get out of the... Please put the ID number for her. Oh, because he's made you host?
Okay.
We'll just have to wait patiently till we get the boss back.
Okay.
Actually, I was facing the same issue for login.
Why? What was the problem, Richa?
Ma'am, actually, we didn't get the login ID and password, and repeatedly it was telling to update the Zoom software.
Yeah, because you have to update it. If you update it, then it's the latest version.
We did that,
Oh.
but it was not, I mean, there was some technical problem. I don't know.
Okay, let's hope that we can get Dr. Russell back. Otherwise, it's us.
Yeah, he's back. He's back. Welcome back, sir. Dr. Russell.
Where is he? Can't see him.
Leader.
I can see him.
You're muted, Dr. Russell, you're muted. What happened?
I think the change to the NBN is caused, we had it 2 days ago.
What is it?
All right. We to a cable, you know, so they've brought this. I think something has gone wrong. It's causing this problem. So we started. Have you left everyone in?
Everyone's in. We're waiting for you.
All right. Very good morning to our American colleagues. Afternoon to the United Kingdom, Europe, and Israel, and Africa, and then to India, Malaysia, China, and ultimately Australia. I'm Russell D'Souza, Professor Russell D'Souza. I come speaking to you from Melbourne. In Australia, I head the Department of Education of the UNESCO chair and also the director, the head of the Asia Pacific Division. And I'm delighted to have all of you here. Welcome to the participant. We have a good number of participants going to join us today. This is the 16th of our international panel discussions, and we've been having this now for many areas that's impacted with COVID. And I'm very delighted that today we are focusing on a very important part of our healthcare, the health science and our workforce, medical workforce, our health workforce, and that's the pharmacy professionals. We had the dental, and week after next will be the nursing. And I'm very delighted that the UNESCO chair in bioethics has a pharmacy bioethics program. And in fact, we started that India, and I'm delighted that we have both Professor
Have we lost Dr. Russell again?
Yeah, looks like it.
Oh. May I request all the participants other than the panelists to please mute your microphones and switch off your videos so that we can save on bandwidth, and the background noise will be eliminated. Other than the panelists, please mute your microphones. Dr. Derek,
Yes, yes.
are you monitoring what has happened?
I think that internet
Issues, is
problem
it?
is he's having, it's not stable.
Okay. So, Derek, why don't you give the instructions before, so
Yeah,
that way we
so
can finish with.
we welcome all the participants to this continuing series of webinars on the various issues surrounding COVID and its outcome. And today we've dedicated the discussion purely to the pharmacy industry, pharmacy and the outcomes that people are facing. And we have this very distinguished panel with us. So we just request all the participants to kindly see that you are muted and switch off your videos as well, so that we can save on the bandwidth and have a uninterrupted telecast. In case you would like to ask any questions from the panelists, you are free to put it into the chat box. We'll collate all the questions and have them answered by the participants before we end this webinar. In case someone would like to speak, we shall also give you a chance at the end. So you can put it again in the chat box or raise your hand, and we will allow you to switch on your video again at the end. So with that, I hand it back to Dr. Russell.
My apologies. I'm having, for the first time in the 16 or 17, we've got today some problems. In case I go off, Dr. Mary, or
We shall continue. We shall strive.
please continue to take on this. Okay, so I welcome you. I'll ask Dr. Mary, the co-chair, to also welcome you, and then we'll set out with our program.
Yeah, so welcome once again. It's such a pleasure to see new faces and new participants. We've been seeing virtually the whole world through these series of webinars, and world and countries and people and different professions in the health care sector. And today we'd like to welcome all our panelists who's from the pharmacy profession. It's so beautiful to see that we've got people from East, West, South, and North all over the world. And thanks to the Indian team, Dr. Suresh, Dr. Richa, and Dr. Shailendra Saraf for getting all our panelists, helping us to get all our panelists together. And I hope we'll have a fruitful session. And we are endeavoring to continue these series till hopefully the lockdown is till the lockdown is over. So that is our aim right now. So Dr. Russell, over to you.
Yeah, okay. So Derek has told you that, and let me now, I welcome all of you. Let me see if I can
Screen share, Dr. Russell.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. No, it's not. I'm not able to get it after this thing went
So while you're getting
okay.
your slides ready, a quick reminder. I have put in a link in the chat box. That is the streaming link on YouTube. So this is also going onto YouTube Live. And you may copy and circulate that to your friends and others who you think would like to watch it and are not able to log on right away or maybe later. So if you just forward that YouTube link to them, they can click on it and watch this webinar. Thank you.
Okay, so we have. I just quickly introduce you. I'm important here. This is of course the 16th, and today we are going to be looking at discussing ethical issues facing pharmacy professionals in responding to the COVID pandemic. Now, I have a very distinguished group of professionals from pharmacy professions who from around the world, and I'm really honored to introduce our panel today. We will start with Dr. Suresh Bogaraj, who is the convener. He is the president of the Pharmacy Council of India, but also the pro-chancellor of the university in India. And we have Dr. Sailendra Saraf, who is the vice chancellor of Durg University. But importantly, he is the vice president of the Pharmacy Council, but more importantly, he heads the Pharmacy Bioethics program of the UNESCO chair in India. And so they have a large number of colleges, around 1,000 odd colleges of pharmacy, where the integrated bioethics curriculum is being introduced. This is part of the UNESCO program. So welcome to both of you. And then I'm delighted now to introduce to you the distinguished Professor Henry Menesi Jr., who is the Professor and Dean Emeritus of the College of Pharmacy at the University of Illinois at Chicago. But Professor Henry was for a long time the past CEO of the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. So we are delighted to have you here. Then we have Professor Mahindra Patel. Again, Mahindra Patel is a senior academic and a pharmacist of national and international profile. Currently, he's a professor at the University of Bradford. He's also with several other universities in Malaysia and USA and so forth. But importantly, I think he's an elected member to the English Pharmacy Board and is the treasurer of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain and was awarded the President's Charter Award for his work and contributions to the pharmacy profession internationally and nationally. So welcome, Professor Mahindra Patel. And then we go on to Dr. Professor Helder Philippi. Am I right in my pronunciation? I'm delighted to welcome you, Professor Helder, who's a professor at the Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Lisbon, so from Portugal. So we have you here, welcome. And then we have my country colleague, Professor Timothy Chen. Timothy Chen is a professor of medication management at the School of Pharmacy at the University of Sydney. He heads the pharmacy practice and health services, and he's a registered pharmacist in Australia, but he's also the president of the social and administrative psychiatry section and co-chairs the next international social pharmacy scientific conference that's taking place. And of course, he leads a very productive research team and is the author of 170 odd papers. Tim's research in medication review had led directly to the Australian government's funding of the Home Medicine Review Program, a very important program that has taken place in Australia. So welcome to you, Professor Timothy. And we'll then go on to Professor Richa Dairamani. She, of course, is a very dynamic person. She coordinates the Pharmacy Bioethics program in India. She is the principal of the Career College of Pharmacy in Ahmedabad in India, and takes an active role with the Pharmacy Bioethics program of the UNESCO chair in India. And we'll have the Ashoka, is that right? That's the Ashoka Victor, who is the chairman of the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya. He's also the CEO of Zen Pharmaceuticals and has several other roles in beyond pharmacy in Kenya. I am delighted to welcome you here. And finally, we have Professor Pire Efa. Pire is also with our UNESCO chair in bioethics, but importantly, he's a professor of public health and pharmaceutical technology at the University Center for Health Sciences, again at the University of Yaoundé in Cameroon. And he's the Director of Health Services at the Ministry of Public Health and the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare of Cameroon. But Professor Pire is the head of the African division of the UNESCO chair in bioethics. So with that, we have this very distinguished group of pharmacy professionals from around the world. And this, of course, signifies an important aspect of our program, and that is solidarity, because we have learned, and through these programs, that all of us in the world, rich and poor, developed and developing, are going through this together, having the same problems, the same issues, and we are hoping and working that we will all come out of it together to successfully. So I want to also now acknowledge we have an international committee of the Education Department that is putting this together, and I want to acknowledge that Dr. Mary Matthew, the head of the co-chair, chairs this committee. We have Professor Joe Thornton, who's here with us from University of Florida. You know, Professor Gerard Fortwinkle from the University of Hanover, who's with us. Baroness Elora, Professor Elora Finlay, the professor from Cardiff in UK. And then we have Dr. Animesh Jain, who is also with us here today, who is part of the program. Professor Stacy Galland from United States. Professor David, who you've already met, who's the moderator, who will be bringing in the chat box and people from the audience who want to ask a question or want to make a comment. That's Derek will be the person. And then we have Dr. John Chisholm from UK, also part of this program from the British Medical Association, and Professor Princey Pelletier. So that that's our acknowledgement to the committee behind putting this together. Now, just to bring us why we are here today, few novel or emerging infectious diseases have posed such a vital ethical challenge so quickly and dramatically as the novel coronavirus SARS-2 which causes the COVID-19. Indeed, all of you will agree, and we have seen this, we are currently experiencing a worldwide breakup of structures that would normally provide security on many levels for each individual in his or her daily life, for society as a whole, and indeed for worldwide. But it is at this time, it is important to uphold fundamental ethical principles wherever possible. And we also experience that guidelines which we are so familiar with, self-evident to all of us, sometimes as in this pandemic, these also have limits that we have never experienced before. So with that, we have come, and I just want to quickly mention once again that we have the Article 14 of the 13, isn't it, of the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, which talks of solidarity and cooperation. And these webinars have been part of that, bringing together new colleagues from around the world, all facing the same issue, but bringing out new relationships, new partnerships that go on, and so forth. And so that is one of the endeavors, or one of the objectives of these webinars. But today, it's very important, we are focusing on an important part of the healthcare providers, or the front-line healthcare professionals, and that is the pharmaceutical or the pharmacy professionals. We just spoken about the guidelines which were used to all these things that we are familiar are now questions that we have to deal with. And in the area of we learn and we see in dealing or in responding to the COVID, we are facing similar issues in terms of we don't have treatments, we have no vaccines, right? No known treatments. So we have many anecdotal stories and reports which in this dire situation, people need treatment, they want medication, and you will see that the pharmacy professionals are having to contend with many ethical issues, not only from being asked to provide treatments that haven't received regulatory approval. What about vaccines? The important issues around vaccines, we are fast-tracking vaccines, trying to bring this out. What are the human challenge studies? All these have got several ethical issues, and the pharmacy professionals are contending, dealing with this as all the others. We've gone through what each of these different professionals have been dealing with, and today it's my great honor that our whole 120 minutes is going to be spent on looking at these areas. So with that, I will now ask come back, and I'm going to ask Professor Suresh Boguraj. Where is Dr. Suresh? Suresh. So I know that Suresh, as the convener, can you? I'm going to ask you to hand over to you for a few moments to welcome and to set the scene. We'll then get your co-convener and the head of the Pharmacy Bioethics Program, Professor Saraf, to also say a few words, and then Professor Mary Matthew, who is the moderator, has been moderating along with Professor Doric, Colonel Doric, these webinars so effectively that I will hand it over back to, and you'll see how we go through this 120 minutes. Okay, can I ask Suresh?
Yes, sir. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the different panelists and viewers from the different parts of the world. We all have gathered this evening here in India, to discuss about the challenges which COVID-19 has posed to the mankind as such, but also to professionals, health professionals, and particularly pharmacy professionals, how we are challenged by the both bioethical issues as well as put by Russell, the ethical issues itself. Quite often what happens is our focus remains only relating to practice-related ethical issues, like, is the pharmacist doing the right effort towards carrying out his responsibilities in the practice, that is in the pharmacy where he is practicing, whether community or hospital. But beyond that, also the role of pharmacists at all levels is now being challenged. In the sense, even in the industry, in the regulatory area, even in academia, we are all challenged by the various issues that come up before us, ethical issues before us. Am I doing the right thing in this particular situation? And is this going to compromise the safety of any of the patients who may or may not be directly be affected by pandemic, but still the compromise that may be happening in this environment, is it going to risk the patient safety of any person here? I think this is the issue which comes in. I can simply narrate a couple of examples. Like in industry, I may not be engaged directly with the manufacturer for the COVID-19 medicines to look at it, but I may be engaged in several other manufacturing processes. But with the disruption caused by the COVID-19, the industry has to continue to carry out its responsibilities, albeit under pressure of not getting infected or colleagues not getting there. So all the processes and procedures need to be redefined so that they are able to carry out those responsibilities. But we all know the industry's safety functions by following a standard procedure, which we have been following for several years. And now you want to rearrange that to suit the needs. I think it's a challenge. Same thing in regulatory requirement. We see here from different bodies coming, different versions coming out for the treatment or management of COVID-19 diseases. Even the trials that are being carried out under different conditions. Each country, each trial which is having, which is being carried out in different parts of the world, has raised several issues that comes up, and it comes back to the only question that, are we doing the right thing? Is it the right step which we are proceeding? And these issues keep coming to us. I am sure this debate here is going to throw some sort of light or consensus to all of us here so that we can move forward. I look forward to all the panelists and others contributing to this. And I would like to congratulate Russell and his team for putting this very important program together for the pharmacy profession. In India, when I met Russell a couple of years ago, we committed that the bioethics would be a part of the pharmacy curriculum. And myself and my Vice President, Dr. Saraf, we took this up in the Pharmacy Council of India, and we have made it as a part of the curriculum, and make sure that the students, while they are getting educated, are made sensitized or conscious of all these responsibilities that are associated with them, and move forward. That's the beginning we have made in training the future generation, and we'll continue to work with UNESCO and RISL in seeing that these bioethics issues are properly addressed and also being trained in the right perspective. I thank you for inviting me here this evening, and look forward to hearing the debate or discussions that may go after this. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Suresh. I want to commend to all of us here. The Pharmacy Council, Professor Suresh Bograj is the president, but they have 1,200 pharmacy schools, and bringing in an integrated ethics curriculum is, I think, commendable for bringing this very important aspect into the curriculum. Congratulations on that. And we are indeed, and that's why we have 250 centers around 58 countries in all the continents. This is part of the UNESCO chain bioethics, and the single the only program of pharmacy ethics belongs to a part of the UNESCO program is with Dr. Saraf and Dr. Suresh. They run the national program covering this large number of pharmacy schools, bringing the integrated bioethics curriculum to pharmacy. So I'm very happy with that and very proud of that, Dr. Suresh. Thank you for that. Yes, this started in 2018 when we met, and there was the Vice Chancellor who's here, Dr. Geeta Lakshmi, Dr. Suresh's friend. And she was very keen to. Yeah, I think she has in her university about 120 schools, pharmacy schools, and she was part of bringing this with Suresh, with Professor Suresh, this whole ethics into the curriculum. So I acknowledge Dr. Geeta Lakshmi too. Now, can I ask Dr. Sailendra Saraf, our co-convener and the head of the Pharmacy Bioethics Program of the UNESCO chair, for a couple of setting the scene, and then Dr. Mary will take over the moderation.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Russell, for giving me an opportunity to welcome all the international guests. On behalf, I extend my greetings on my own behalf and by my president and Pharmacy Council of India as well. It's really a great occasion when pharmacy is on board with UNESCO chair. And this is the first event, though this is the 16th in the row, but the first event where pharmacy is represented in UNESCO. Um, with a preliminary note, Dr. Russell, we have more than 1,000 plus colleges only offering PG and Form D. And overall, we have 4,000 plus colleges offering graduate B Form and diploma degrees from different institutions. So we have a great pool of trained pharmacists in this country. And this pandemic has really provided an opportunity us to prove the role of the pharmacy professional in the healthcare team. And I salute all the pharmacists because without any preparation, when there was discrimination with the medical profession, they were not having sufficient protective devices and gloves and even sanitizers. But there was not even a single observation from the big country like India that the pharmacist had declined to perform the responsibility as a pharmacist. So pharmacy is growing, though the pharmacy profession is very new in India. And this pharmacy practice was started in real sense in 2008 only, when the father of pharmacy practice in India, Professor Suresh, started Pharm.D program in India, and it is really kick-started in a big way. And now we have completed 10 years, and now we are again going to revise the course curriculum and all that. And we are hopeful that the course curriculum and training of Pharm.D program must be at par with the best program anywhere in the world. And Pharmacy Council of India is providing leadership role, and we are open to adopt any good practices available in any part of the world. So with this preliminary note, I really thankful to Dr. Russell for showing interest to bring pharmacy in the UNESCO chair for the bioethics. And with the limited resources, the pharmacy professionals doing extraordinary good. It is whether it is pharmaceutical production, academics, or even in frontline warriors as a pharmacist in clinical setup and pharmaceutical dispensaries. At the same time, I urge upon all the panels to have the recommendation, like, because there are several ethical recommendations, but there are no set of guidelines for the ethical standards in case of emergencies or in case of pandemic like this. So when we are talking about the management of today's pandemic, this is again our responsibility to have a futuristic approach to set some standard for the future pandemics, because this is the prediction of one and all. We have to learn to live with such type of circumstances in pandemic. So while we are discussing about the present, at the same time, we have to discuss about the policy of the future. So thank you very much, Dr. Russell, and thank you very much, Professor Suresh, because of some important event we are going on, he was not able to join, but on my request, he is here. So I'm really thankful, Professor Suresh, for spending the time for this particular webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Russell. Over to you, Dr. Mary.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Saraf, and thank you, Suresh. I know that you have other important issues that are taking place, but thank you for taking the trouble to be with us. Okay, we appreciate that. Okay, Professor Mary Matthew is, of course, she's the co-chair. She heads, she's part of the education department, and she's a professor of pathology at the MAHE, which is the Manipal Academy of Higher Education, and she coordinates the neonatal pathology and has several awards and so forth. But I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Mary, who is the moderator for all these programs. So Dr. Mary, Professor Mary, can you take over and let's start our discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. And good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all our participants and especially our panelists. I thank Dr. Suresh and Dr. Shailinda for taking this initiative and coming on board and bringing us all together. Because many times for the past, even though this is our 16th webinar, we've been talking about healthcare professionals, mainly focusing on doctors and dentists, and the effects of COVID on families. But we thought pharmacy is so underrepresented. It's high time we have to find out, I mean, at least discuss and bring them into the healthcare, to bring their prominence into the healthcare system. So this was really I commend Dr. Russell for bringing all of you together, all the panelists from different parts of the world, to talk about the problems that the pharmacy profession is facing. So with that, I'd like to start with Professor
Mary,
Yes.
Professor Mary, one moment. Can I just tell all of you, the panelists here, we have this, the proceedings here, we're going to get all of you, to be part of a publication. We did this with the family therapy, with the others. So we will have one of you, maybe Dr. Professor Mahendra Patel, or one will coordinate with me, and we will be putting this in the international, the Global Bioethical Inquiry, which is an international cited, the journal of the UNESCO. So this will be a publication, and all of you will be the co-authors to this, the proceedings of this panel discussion on responding, the pharmacy role in responding to the ethical issues with the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. And I'd like to start with Professor Henry. Professor Henry from your University of Illinois, USA. Professor, can you hear me? Please unmute yourself. We'd like to know, Professor, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Derek?
Can one of you please,
Derek,
Dr.
you
Derek?
might have to do it, I think.
No, I think you're self-muted, Professor Henry.
See if you can remove it.
Lower left. Oh, yeah. You're good. You're good.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, Professor Henry, we'd like to know what are the ethical, not the ethical issues per se, but what are the issues now that the pharmacy profession is facing in USA? Because I'd like to take an overview from different parts of the world. What is USA facing in terms of, the practice of pharmacy?
Yes, and again, thank you for the invitation. Good day, everyone. And I'm pleased to see several of my colleagues as part of the panel as well. As I look and have examined what's been going on for the last 5 months or so in the United States, I would enumerate a series of issues. First of all, in the absence of therapeutics and a vaccine, there is a segment of the society that is looking for cures in anything that may exist. And as a consequence, pharmacists are being requested by many patients either to take something that has not been validated, or from a regulatory point of view, that the indication has been approved. So, for example, the whole issue of hydroxychloroquine presented a very serious challenge, including the hoarding by both physicians and some patients of that very important medicine for patients who use it for indications. I think another important issue, and this is more so in the hospitals, and I'm sorry that our our colleague Frank Suknoski was not able to join us today. He was the director of pharmacy at Montefiore Hospital in New York, and I was in touch with him almost every day during the height of the crisis in the hospitals in New York City. And in addition to the challenges presented by seriously ill patients, they were also facing shortages of critical drugs like muscular blocking agents, some of the narcotic analgesic agents. And again, that's a big ethical issue from my point of view, this whole question of drug shortages. And what is the role of the industry? What's the role of the distributors? What's the role of pharmacists in managing the whole issue of drug shortages? I think we also are challenged by a more effective use of the pharmacist workforce. And this was brought home to me in my own state where state laws prohibit pharmacists from being formally designated as emergency workers. Now, that's an important issue because in the worst of all times, if we were short of worker personnel to manage a serious crisis, a significant portion of the healthcare workforce would not be appropriately utilized. And in fact, it would be illegal perhaps to use that component of the workforce. And it came home to roost in Chicago. We were expecting a similar situation as New York. And as a consequence, with the help of the military, a field hospital was established in Chicago of 3,000 beds. Now, if you think about managing a 3,000 bed temporary hospital facility, and then specifically look at what are the drugs that are necessary, what are the fluids that are necessary, what is the sterile preparation requirements in that kind of a setting, you need a substantial pharmacist workforce to make sure that the institution and the field hospital is working sufficiently. But given the fact that there is this illegal or legal prohibition of designating pharmacists as emergency workers, if the situation would have gotten out of hand, it'd be a big question as to what would happen. And I think bottom line, we would say patient care would be significantly compromised. And I think that's an important ethical issue. I think the last issue that I would raise is there's tremendous anticipation now of a vaccine coming onto the market, perhaps by the end of the year or beginning of next year. And that raises all kinds of issues with respect to access, with respect to financing, with respect to administration. And we have had good success in the United States having pharmacists administer vaccines. We have a very high rate of influenza vaccination, for example. And I think that's largely because pharmacies in the community are easily accessible. We have competent people in those facilities, and as a consequence, make a great contribution to public health. So, Professor Matthew, these are just a few of my thoughts.
Okay, because we will come back to the issue of vaccines, because that is a very big issue. And my understanding is that pharmacists in USA have prescribing rights. So they can prescribe drugs, and but
that's dependent on the state.
Depends on the state.
Yeah, practice is governed by the states. So
right.
There are a number of states that have authorized certain prescriptive authorities for pharmacists. And in fact, some states even allow in emergency situations such as this to make changes to existing prescriptions or to switch drugs if certain drugs might not be available. But that is limited by states.
But it is surprising that they have prescribing rights, but they're not considered as emergency workers, because that really does not go together.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah. So it's high time, I think, when Professor Shailendra was talking about, we need to set the stage for guidelines now for a pandemic, because this is the right time when the world can get together globally and establish guidelines for pharmacy practice. And I think this platform is a very good platform to at least where a beginning can be. We can make a start in terms of guidelines during pandemic for in pharmacy practice. So that is where I want all the panelists to at least keep that in mind. And I want to raise this issue of hydroxychloroquine, and I want Dr. Shailendra to address this. Because HCQ is produced in large amounts in India, and apparently a lot of the supply has gone to USA, and now it's not being prescribed in USA. Am I correct, Professor Henry, in saying that HCQ is not prescribed there for COVID treatment, COVID-19?
Yeah, what we saw was when the first news came that hydroxychloroquine might be able to stop the virus, there was a big demand. And all of a sudden shortages started to occur. And simultaneously, more evidence was coming out that hydroxychloroquine has serious cardiac side effects, and its use must be made very judicious. Then the studies started coming out that hydroxychloroquine was not as effective as what people first thought, even though the Food and Drug Administration had given emergency authorization for the use of hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19. Then we began to see a waning demand. Even though there was hoarding, and several states began to pass legislation to inhibit and stop this hoarding. And I would say our colleagues in medicine were part of this problem. They started hoarding it in their own practices and depleting the supplies. And that created problems for those patients who need this drug for other indications.
Yeah, because right now the recent studies are showing that actually hydroxychloroquine really does not make a difference. In fact, it increases the duration of stay in the hospital by 4 days. You know, and so these are the studies that are coming out contrary to the initial study that said this was a very good drug. So I'd like Dr. Shailendra to address this. Dr. Shailendra,
I'm audible.
The question of hydroxychloroquine, let me just set the stage in India. We were, as medical professionals, all of us were told to take a dose of hydroxychloroquine. And we are sending our medical students, this is a false, sense of security. They are sent to the front line with with the recommended dose of chloroquine, and and they are exposed to the disease. Can you tell us exactly what is happening about hydroxychloroquine in India?
Let me first mention the status of the production of manufacturing of different formulation in India. Even during this pandemic, where there was logistic was badly affected, there was no cash flow, even though we have produced and supplied the chloroquine to the world. This is one capacity we have demonstrated to the world, that in the given circumstances we can supply to anybody. Number one. Number two, my personal observation with the HCQ, there is no mature behavior from any agency as far as the use and this restriction is concerned. A paper is published in Lancet and overnight without any verification, and next day there is another advisory. So we are not responding in a very we can say ethical manner when we have put this particular for the terminal cases, and again we bid on, and there was a international pressure to promote one particular drug, and that condition this particular chloroquine was removed from the weaponry to tackle the problem with the terminal cases of this COVID-19, and another was proposed. But in real sense, this chloroquine was the effect is at par with the remdesivir as far as terminal cases are concerned, because in most of the cases where this COVID is not very symptomatic, so there is no specific requirement of any drug. But overnight, where the production was going on, manufacturing was going on, and all of a sudden it was announced that there is no more prescribed drug for the COVID-19. And in similar cases, there are several number of we can say reports are coming in and pouring in about the repurposing drug, and without any serious risk benefit assessment, we are using and we are recommending the drugs to the patients. As far as India is concerned, the pharmacists are not empowered to write the prescription. Even we are not empowered to change the prescription with the change with the generic. So this opportunity we are going to encash in a big way to provide this workforce this responsibility to prescribe the drugs, at least to change the drug molecules, and some guidelines in case of this SOS conditions or pandemic or emergency. So this is my observation about this chloroquine, because there is no specific study is available as far as the effect or side effect is concerned. All is just going on based on the hear and say, no specific, even a 1 day, it take only 1 day to withdraw this drug from the advisory of the WHO. So it itself reflects how serious we are and how we are trying with the different drugs, and compromising with the ethics and we can say the safety and security of the patients. So we have to again think, and we have to devise some mechanism as far as this Pfizer's new vaccine is also coming. And 2 days back, 6th of July, there is a WHO, another advisory there about the fast track this evaluation of vaccines. So there is no consistency of the this policy making, and this is creating a lot of problem as far as the ground force is concerned, because there is a dilemma for everything.
Yes, because as of now, we don't have any drugs.
Yes.
What is being prescribed now? What is it that because today's paper says that dexamethasone is very powerful. So today it is dexamethasone.
So this is known for all of us, that when we want to subside the acute reaction, we can give corticosteroids, but it associated with different ethical issues. So this is not the treatment. So everybody is doing the treatment based on their own knowledge and their own risk and benefit assessment. So what I have again in the beginning, my preliminary note I have discussed. So there's some sort of decision, some sort of policy we have to discuss, evolve, so that we can empower the doctors and frontline workforce to have the experiments based on this different variables, because in a country like India, we have a lot of diversity, genotype and phenotypic
Yes,
variations, and
yes.
we are dealing with a single drug, and that is also not proven efficiently.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shailendra. I want to go to Professor Timothy from Australia. Professor Timothy.
Good evening and hello, everyone.
Yeah, Professor Timothy, thank you. I'm trying to get you in as soon as possible so that you don't fall asleep. I know it's very late there in Australia. Okay. Now, my question is, you heard Professor Henry and Professor Shailendra talk about the drugs that, currently which are being used for COVID-19 and which are actually not actually for treatment. So you have a lot of drugs which are off-label drugs which are being used, right? So can you tell us something about the off-label drugs and what is happening in Australia right now with regard to pharmacy practice? Do pharmacists, the profession has the prescribing rights in Australia?
Okay, thank you. To answer your first question, pharmacists currently don't have prescribing rights in Australia for prescription medicines. However, it will occur, I think, into the future. There's quite a lot of research underway in relation to pharmacist prescribing rights. If we go back to the first discussion point in relation to off-label use, I think perhaps it's important to understand what is off-label use from a technical definition. We know that off-label use refers to use of a medicine for an indication for which it's not been approved by a regulatory authority, such as the Food and Drug Administration, or in Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So that means we don't have safety or efficacy data in relation to the use of that medicine for an alternative indication. And so quite a lot of the papers and quite a lot of the discussion has been about the repurposing of medicines for different indications. Already we've talked about the examples of hydroxychloroquine and dexamethasone. And when we're thinking about off-label use of medicines, we should really think about these in relation to, is there an alternative effective treatment? And in the case of COVID-19, there's not an effective treatment currently. Could these individual patients be recruited to a clinical trial of a repurposed medicine? I think that's an important consideration. And in the absence of that, then individual consumers and healthcare professionals really do need to come to a shared decision-making approach as to whether a off-label medicine is appropriate or not. And this is a really significant issue. And then, of course, if the off-label medicine is prescribed and used, then there's a significant need for monitoring, for documenting and sharing the experience with other people. To comment on one,
Professor Timothy, just to interrupt you, what are the other off-label drugs that are being used for COVID-19 other than hydroxychloroquine, dexamethasone? Is there anything else that is being used?
So we've had some really interesting developments with remdesivir, the antiviral medicine. Okay, so with remdesivir, it's clearly at the beginning of the pandemic was off-label use. It appears that remdesivir is valuable in reducing the number of, or reducing the duration of symptoms for people who have significant symptoms associated with COVID-19 by, I think the studies suggest, from 15 days to 11 days in relation to a reduction in the symptom period for individuals. One very interesting thing in Australia recently is that our Therapeutic Goods Administration, which is our major regulatory body, has fast-tracked the approval of remdesivir. So it's shifted from an off-label use to a regulated use for that medicine. So I think that's an important important milestone in relation to changes in regulatory policy in the context of an acute pandemic situation.
All right. So is remdesivir, how costly is it?
I'm not aware of the exact cost off the top of my head, but obviously it's a parenteral medication, and it's just administered to people with who are hospitalized and who have significant symptoms within
because my understanding of Australian health system is that majority of it the government pays for it.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So in Australia, we have a pharmaceutical benefit scheme, which is essentially a co-payment scheme. So if the individual is in primary care, then the individual consumer would have a co-payment for the use of a particular medicine. In the case of remdesivir in the hospital setting, there would be no charge to the individual patient whilst in the hospital setting, no direct charge to the individual
because
patient.
that poses a problem for the developing and underdeveloped countries where patients cannot afford this drug. Because here all the treatment is paid by the patient, and this drug happens to be a little more expensive. And as of what I read today is now they're making the inhaled, the inhalation formulation for remdesivir. So this is very challenging because developed countries can afford the treatment through insurance and through government payment. But for countries like India and probably Africa, it may be a different story altogether. So Dr. Timothy, I'll come back to you. I want to get Professor Achoka Victor. Professor?
It's doctor, not yet professor though. Maybe when I grow up, I'll be one. When I grow up, I'll be a professor.
No. I promoted you in faith.
Yeah, I know. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Professor Mary. So you're saying?
Yes. Okay. My question is, for developing countries and underdeveloped countries, patients cannot afford this treatment. We were talking about remdesivir, which is very expensive in India. I don't know how in Kenya. And what is the treatment that is being given for COVID-19? Because Africa started a little later than all.
Yeah, the rest of the world, yes. Oh. Hello, Professor Mary. Yeah, I think she's having some challenges with her internet.
But you are audible. Please, you can continue.
Dr. Achoka, you can carry on. Dr. Mary may be having an issue. You can speak. We can hear you.
It's okay. So thank you, everyone. Greetings from Kenya. Calling you from Nakuru. Greetings from my president for the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya, Dr. Machogu. And having said that, things in Kenya seem to be getting a little bit tricky right now. Yesterday, we reported the highest number yet for the very first time. Oh, she's back. And she's muted.
No, I think there was.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
No, my internet is unstable.
You're having some bad weather, is it?
Yeah, looks like it. So let me go on. So what's been happening?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Apologies.
Oh, so Professor
Go
Mary,
ahead.
I was answering your question in part. For what I
Yes.
got, you're asking about the situation here in Kenya and probably in the
Yes.
general sub-Saharan Africa. I can speak
Yes.
very well for Kenya right now. Yesterday, we reported the highest number yet from a sample size of around 4,500. Yeah, give or take, yeah, 4,522. We're able to get 688 cases. That is quite alarming because in the recent past, we've been getting very low numbers. So we know that all predictions are pointing towards a spike, a major spike sometime in September. Our first cases were reported in March, mid-March, around the 12th. So we are bracing ourselves for what is to come. And in our neighboring countries, from April, Tanzania has not been reporting any cases. The government went on record and said there are no cases of corona in Tanzania. And in Uganda, there are slightly over 1,000. So that creates a logistical challenge considering a very porous nature of the Tanzanian border. But having said that, the mortality rates are pretty low here. And you did ask about the medications that are available for the management of COVID-19. So currently, we have very few patients on critical care. The mortalities are, in total, I think we've had around 200 mortalities so far. And considering the disease is not only respiratory, I think they're using the blood thinners, rivaroxaban, they're using vitamin C, they've been using the steroids. They've been using...
Are you using hydroxychloroquine?
Yeah, part of the questions that I was to speak about today was the issue of hoarding, actually. That was
please tell us about it, yes.
Yeah, there was a massive shortage. Yeah, before, by the time the information about the use of HCQS, hydroxychloroquine, had come out, the diseases had yet to be reported here in Kenya. So by the time we started getting the cases, already a lot of these drugs had already been hoarded. So there's nothing even to buy. And this was happening in multiple levels. You're talking about logistical, even importing it. Most of the imports actually come from India because you only had one brand of this drug in the market, the Kenyan market. And drugs like remdesivir, currently I think we are trying to, part of the registration process is going on to get in this molecule from India actually. I think from Cipla, if I'm not wrong. And so, yeah, so the product is not even in the market, at least for use. If it is, at least maybe that's through parallel imports or special imports. But as we speak right now, we are doing more supportive care. And hopefully over time we should be able to, but as you rightfully pointed out, it's going to be a major challenge cost-wise for these new molecules.
May I ask you, do pharmacists have rights to prescribe drugs there in Kenya?
So our legislation, the laws which govern the practice of pharmacy here, CAP 244, is a little bit, there are quite a number of gray areas. What happens is that the number of pharmacy outlets in the country are so many because you have different levels of practice. We have pharmacists, BPharm and above, clinical pharmacists, and all other cadres. Then we have lower cadres, where there's a diploma, like some sort of certification in pharmacy, like pharmacy assistants. And there are very many colleges which are training these lower cadres. So what has happened here due to the weak legislation, so to speak, is that we have very many outlets, and despite the best of efforts from our regulatory bodies to try and regulate these outlets, this has not been possible. So many of these outlets run as though,
like
shops. Yeah, so whatever you could easily walk in and carry as much of product that you wish for. But things are much better than they were in the past, let me say that.
Okay, right. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Yeah. May I get in Dr. Mahindra Patel? Professor, are you there?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Please unmute yourself, sir.
Yes. Hello, Professor Matthew. Thank you for inviting me to this esteemed panel here, and thank you, Professor Russell. Very important we talk about the bioethics around the global perspective and how we can bring things together, I think it's important that we have a uniform approach, and we need to standardize things at some point, bearing in mind that we have differences with different countries in terms of legislation, in terms of practice, in terms of education as well. Within the UK, I think what we've had is, we've mentioned obviously the issues around shortage of drugs and where pharmacists can play a big part. Initially during the pandemic, there was a panic in terms of people going in and wanting to make sure they've got their medication. And so therefore that initial knee-jerk reaction caused a temporary shortage within the supply stream, really. It was not a shortage from the manufacturer in any way, but just a sudden spike in the delivery system. And whilst we overcame that, I was just wondering that perhaps in view of another spike arise, a wave arising, then how can we look at better catering for our patients where there is a shortage? And perhaps is there something where we can have, where drugs are returned to pharmacies? In the UK, we often, from a safe disposal perspective, returning good medication, either a patient's passed away or they've changed on to different treatment, and they've been returned back to the pharmacies. Is this a mechanism where we can recycle those medication, really, so to avoid that real backlog where we may get in future some issues around supply systems? I know it will be different in different parts of the world, but is this something that we could consider, and is this something that we could standardize in some form and put something together from that perspective?
Professor Mahindra, just to interrupt you, when you say hoarding of medicines, which medicines are you talking about?
No, it could be their long-term condition management. It could be, everything that they've been taking from it could be respiratory condition, it could be diabetes, it could be cardiovascular treatment. They may be thinking because of lockdown coming in, we may not be able to get our supplies,
right. Okay,
et cetera,
so
it
is not the COVID not an HCQ or, because that really, I'm talking from my experience, speaking from my experience. March 24th, when India declared a lockdown, my first concern was to get all the diabetic medication for my mother. So correct. I just ran to the pharmacy and bought how much ever I could, because it is frightening to think that, patients who require medication will not be able to get medication. And it's understandable. But what you're saying is also, recycling it, giving it back, which is possible in India. It is not, it is possible in India. But this is a panic which people have. In fact, the nephrology department said they were so concerned about their transplant patients getting their medication because they used to come from villages, for their treatment. And we had systems in place where we could network with the pharmacist to ensure that the patients get their medication. So, I understand that panic of hoarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, we talk about another wave coming potentially, and this is all about learning from the COVID pandemic, really, and how can we make things more efficient, more effective, yes, safer for the patients at the same time, but is there something in place there? So if you look at some of the inhalers, the respiratory medicines, yes, people maybe, there might be a sudden surge on those as well, really. So how can we ensure that the delivery and the continuity of services and supplies and provision to the patient is maintained without causing any extra undue anxiety and stress for themselves as well? So that's one aspect.
Professor Mahindra, there probably would have been some, there probably on the government's part, there wouldn't have been proper thinking in terms of medications for the patients. If everyone, Professor Mahindra, you're there?
Yes.
Okay, because you went off my screen, someone else came on the screen. Okay, because if the government had said that the pharmacy would remain open, then we could have probably avoided this panic, because it was a complete lockdown, a complete shutdown, which made, which forced people to go into this kind of, panic mode and hoarding.
Exactly. And this is preempting the situation. One of the other things that we have here in the UK is the substitution of medicines. So when a medication is prescribed by brand or a particular type of medication or a form, could the pharmacist then be relaxed in certain situations where they can substitute those medicines, where it doesn't have to be in that particular form? They don't have to wait to get the consent of the prescriber or their doctor or whoever is prescribing at the time. And is there an opportunity here that using the skills and the training and the qualification that particularly that we have as a 5-year program for pharmacists to become competent and registered in practicing, is there something that we could do from a wider perspective that could allow us to substitute? This is also causing less tension on the patient, waiting, not having their medication, waiting for the doctor to come back and say, yes, I can change those for a different brand, or you can have the capsules instead of the tablets, etc. Just simple things that could be a very enormous help to the patient. But again, as we know, so the efficacy, the bioavailability will change on certain drugs, and how does that affect the patient as well, really? But is that perhaps there's an area where we can look at in a wider, more uniform perspective, from a global perspective, how we can utilize the role of the pharmacist and the skills of the pharmacist even better from that perspective.
Professor Mahindra, we'll come back to education registration, because I want to finish this issue of medication. So I need Dr. Suresh to come in. I hope he's there. Dr. Suresh is there, or he has left. Dr. Suresh, thank you for waiting. I know you have an urgent, you need to go. The issue of hoarding in India and shortage of drugs. Can you tell our panelists what had happened in India?
I think what I would say is there has never been a real shortage of any medication in India as such. I would put it bluntly like that. Access and availability might have differed in different regions. Like if there is a particular total lockdown of a particular region, the medication might have not reached the patient in the time which is required or where he has to reach. It might have been there, but as such, the supply of medicine was not an issue. Because even when the lockdown started off, in most of the pharmaceutical companies, they very clearly said, despite the challenge that may be there in importing materials from China for some of the raw materials, they can continue to supply these medications for next 3 to 6 months. So there was never a challenge before the country as such, what is going to happen if the medicines are not going to be there. So this is very, very important for us to understand. Now, second point is regarding the people's reaction. It is a normal reaction when somebody says, tomorrow all restaurants are going to be closed. Our first reaction is to go and buy whatever we can, irrespective of whether we need it or not. It's a human reaction. We cannot prevent that. But once they settle down to the normal routine, they know that, yes, there is no challenge, and people become a little more relaxed.
Yeah, but Professor, one moment, but there was paracetamol they're regulating now in India.
No, again, it's a misconception which is there. The availability of raw material for manufacture of paracetamol tablets, the API that was required, was being imported from China all along because it was cheaper. So now, as soon as the reaction was that that we cannot import or may not be able to import the quantities which we want, immediately the API industry started working in manufacturing those APIs that are required for, API in the sense active pharmaceutical ingredients that would be required for the paracetamol.
But if you go to a pharmacy right now, I'm talking about my experience, they take down your phone number if you require paracetamol.
I don't know, maybe they must be taking it as a caution, because there are two reasons for taking. If you are taking paracetamol, you are taking it because you want to lower your body temperature.
Yes.
So one of the indications for such a step is that if you are suffering from corona infection, one of the immediate reaction is that your temperature will go up, your throat and other related issues will start. So they want to track patients who have taken paracetamol without prescription to make sure that tomorrow, if there is a need, they can reach out to them. The point of contact is to be noted. Who has purchased? Why did he purchase paracetamol? That is the reason, rather than not paracetamol not being available for the person. This is the basic reason. When some of these drugs relating to symptoms of relating to the corona was being purchased in the pharmacy, people wanted to make sure they know who is buying it and why he is buying it. So the health officers, the drug authorities were routinely checking these issues which are required. Now, one more point I would like to add here, which you mentioned earlier, was that resupply of drugs back to the pharmacy. I think that can happen only in where the supply chain is secure. Like if it is a case of in a hospital setting, if the medication is given to bedside and then brought back to the pharmacy, it is okay, because the medication did not leave the site of the practice where it is there. But if today a patient takes the medication home and then he comes back to pharmacy to give it back, that is not permitted as per law, because we do not know what is the supply chain, and tomorrow there may be some adverse effect happening because of that. So that is why no pharmacy legally is expected to take back the medicines once being sold to get back onto the pharmacy for repurposing it, or I mean not repurposing, reselling it to somebody else. I think this is very, very important factor, I think, which I'd like to emphasize here, because there are a lot of international panelists here. So this is not allowed in India as per the law. You cannot send it back to take it back as a patient to the pharmacy and tell him, though some may be practicing it, but by law they are not supposed to do it.
Yeah. No, because in smaller shops, you are able to take it back. So I mean, that's what's happening. Thank you, Professor Suresh. I'll go to Professor Helder from Portugal. Professor.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for waiting for so long and patiently. What is the issue of pharmacists there, pharmacy practice in Portugal? Are you given prescription rights?
No, but we don't think that we need that right, because
why do you say that, Professor?
Yeah, because the access to the prescribers is easy. We have NHS that is universal, so people go to the doctor and after go to the pharmacist and have the dispensing of the prescription, and we don't need in our system, we don't feel that this is our main goal in the next future, because there is a good access to doctors and to pharmacies, and there is not a need in Portugal to have this right. But okay. I would like to come back just a bit to share what is my impression on this, because I was involved since the beginning on this crisis working group on COVID, and I would like to underline two aspects. One is that the pharmacy is a scientific profession, so we should do things based on science or science-based.
Yes.
And this is an ethical issue, or was and still, when with the beginning of the pandemic, where we were part of the treatment of patients that were treated with medicines that have no evidence to be used on these patients. So off-label use was the situation, because we had no medicine with this indication, and we didn't use the COVID, so it was difficult to choose medicine. So we had a lot of patients treated with medicines that were not had no evidence to be used, and this is an ethical issue. We can discuss.
Which medicines, Professor? Which medicines?
Dozens of medicines.
Give us a few examples.
I can give you some examples: lopinavir, retinavir, sofosbuvir,
all the antivirals.
Antivirals. Not just antivirals, baricitinib, and so on and so on and so on. Because when we don't have medicine, you tend to, and you have a patient that has a good probability to die, you tend to use what you think that can work, because works in similar situations or because of mechanistic reason to use. This is probably the right thing to do, but it's important to start as soon as possible clinical trials in order to generate evidence. And this was done. Now WHO has the Solidarity clinical trial, that is a very pragmatic clinical trial, and some results are coming now, and that's why we decided not to use hydroxychloroquine anymore, because there is no evidence that there is no efficacy, and the safety is become a problem, and we have to incorporate the results of the clinical trials that are in place now and coming in, and I think from the pharmaceutical point of view that this is very urgent. The other thing that is not very discussed, but is a problem at least in Portugal and in other European countries, because we discussed with other colleagues, is the non-COVID patients. Because of the COVID, now all the resources are moving
directed to, yes.
And we have patients, oncological patients, and with other very serious conditions that are not coming to hospital because they are afraid of COVID.
Yes.
And they don't have access to medicines in hospital pharmacy because they are afraid to go there.
Yes.
And in Portugal, we try to solve at least in part the problem with the community pharmacies. So there was a plan working together with hospitals to make patients to have access to this.
So that the supply chain is not broken. Supply chain is not broken.
No, and it's changing to the community pharmacy. And I think that we have, as pharmacists, we have to learn with these experiences in order to propose in the future a different
the role
approach,
of community pharmacy.
Yes, patient-based, and with a much bigger and much important role of community pharmacists and community pharmacy on the supply of care in order to give more access and more conditions to the patient. So
yeah, that's what Professor Henry was saying. Pharmacy is not given, even though they're very important in the healthcare system, they're not given any, as frontline workers, they're not given any importance, which I think this pandemic should, change that view that even pharmacy practice has to be part of the frontline care.
Yeah, you know that in Portugal, the pools that are being done, the pharmacists are one of the professions more recognized for the population. So we have a very good coverage of pharmacies.
Okay.
We have at least three. The mean is 3 pharmacists for pharmacy. Pharmacists can vaccinate can administer medicine. So population is asking, the population is asking more and more for the pharmacies, and I think
that's a very beautiful idea, not to break the supply chain, that community pharmacists come in and make sure that the healthcare system continues to function, even for patients who are not non-COVID patients, that their medication has not, there is no disruption of medication when it comes to patients. So I think the role of community pharmacists is very important. Thank you, Professor. I need to go to Professor Pierre from Cameroon. Professor Pierre? Yes, Professor, thank you for waiting. We have a long list of panelists, so the reason why I want you to talk right now is about, just like in India, I'm sure in Africa also, there are medications which are not proven for any disease, but people have more faith in medications which are not allopathic. So how is the situation there in Cameroon? During this pandemic, were people taking medications which were not recommended by the doctors, which were not allopathic?
Well, as we know, this COVID-19, it's a health problem.
Yes.
But that health problem became a political problem.
Okay.
And the pharmacy profession is facing a huge challenge to show to the public opinion that this profession is a profession of health workers. Not, of course, it has some aspect of commercial profession, but it's deeply a health profession.
Yes.
And then when the government start dealing with the team of the emergency, there was a few pharmacies, not enough as we thought, but things are moving. Because in our country, also the situation is many other African countries. The pharmacy at the beginning was not a healthcare profession. It was a commercial profession.
Okay.
And then with all the efforts of WHO and the International Federation of Pharmacists and so on, things are moving. The first thing was to manage the curricula in all the faculty of pharmacy for the training of pharmacists in African countries, and also the pharmacists, African pharmacists trained out of Africa, and to have a common curricula. I think this is done. It has been done through the African Pharmaceutical Forum, which is the link, the African branch of the International Federation of Pharmacy. And then at the level of Ministry of Health, the law on pharmacy is a health law. And you can, the pharmacy in the details, what we call to deliver the medicine to the the list should come from the Minister of Public Health.
Okay.
And things were moving well before this crisis of COVID-19. When COVID-19 came, we used to have medicines considered as a good one.
You have inquired recently.
From the sector, the pharmaceutical sector, international pharmaceutical sector. And a lot of people are using also African traditional medicine. This is not very official. Of course, we have rules from WHO to have what they call, it's not really an agreement. It's some accommodation, some arrangements to officialize the medicine from the traditional sector. But when we had the COVID-19, most of the people, the population went to the traditional medicine. And the polemics on hydroxychloroquine and so on, the big pharma testing vaccine and so on, did not help at all Africans on this point of view. Because what do we trust now? We don't really know what to do. And then while waiting the international community to find a solution, and that solution need to be evaluated by Africans. So now Africans are not sure at all. There is too much discussion of money, big pharma, and so on. And then while waiting, the thing that they need to do, they want to do now is to enhance research and production of medicine from the African way, the African tradition.
Yes, because this is an opportunity actually to for research to to be conducted at this stage, because right now we have no treatment, we have no solutions. So many people are falling back on their traditional medicines for a cure. And that is also true in India. It happens also in India, where the Ayurvedic system of medicine is there. So I think it is high time, because that we, since we are all here in one platform, that we come together to have some sort of guidelines, not only for Africa, but for a global, for globally for pharmacists and the practice of pharmacists regarding what is the role of pharmacy practice in pandemic. I think that is very important for us to at least take home, even as a message to take home, that we need to think now about guidelines that we should put in place regarding pharmacy practice. Thank you, Professor Pierre. Thank you very much for your opinion. I'll go to Dr. Richa, Professor Richa.
Yes, unmute.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, Dr. Richa, the practice of Ayurvedic medicine in India and its role during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, that is true, because India being a vast country and full of diversities, and in this there were so many bioethical dilemma situations also, especially for the community pharmacist. First of all, I will answer that. I'll come to that at a later point, but I wish to bring forward a couple of concerns of bioethics, bioethical dilemma that the pharmacist, community pharmacists were facing, is that first of all, when they are dealing with so many patients or the customers who are coming to buy the medicines, and initially in India, we had witnessed that there was a shortage of masks and the protective gear. So the pharmacists, they themselves were at risk. So it was a situation that needed to be addressed, and there was a there was a feeling of fear and anxiety that was existing in the pharmacist community as well, because they whatever like they could, because there was complete absence of guidelines and protocols how to tackle this situation and how to work. But so initially many pharmacies were closed, but slowly they could, by their own intelligence and by their own logic, they could devise some methods and means for social distancing, and and then they started functioning, and then they started dispensing the medicines. As far as hospital setup is concerned, a couple of my friends, they were there, and we witnessed the situation where everybody ran away initially, even the doctors.
Because the fear was there, right?
Yeah, fear was there,
and they were not probably provided protective
care.
Yes.
So they were concerned about their safety first, obviously. And there was also a complete uncertainty that was existing, and lack of facilities was also there. Even receiving cash, because India, the digital system of payment is not very it is not very commonly to the grassroots level.
Yes.
So most of the time, in a hospital setup or in a private clinic also, normally cash is only the common means of transaction. So that was also a point of that exposes the the collector and the whole staff with the risk of COVID infection, coronavirus infection. So that was also a concern. So who will take the cash? Who will diagnose? Who will perform the procedure? So they will be exposed to the biological, fluids and all the operations and everything. So initially it was a hodgepodge situation, but later on, slowly things got streamlined after maybe 45 to 50 days, I suppose. And meanwhile, there was so much of this one was going on with respect to the treatment, prophylactic also. So for prophylactic, Ayush guidelines, Ayush app was very proactively launched by the Indian government.
Dr. Richa, can you tell the panelists what Ayush is?
Ayush is a department like for Ayurveda.
The full form is it is for Ayurvedic medicine.
Ayurvedic medicines.
Correct. Okay.
So Ayurveda, naturopathy, homeopathy, also all the alternative therapies it comprises of, but largely Ayurveda. So naturopathy and Ayurveda, actually in our India, it is traditionally only, it is imbibed in our day-to-day living. So like we are using so many spices and condiments and other things, and now of late we are seeing that green tea is also effective in building immunity. So largely the stress.
If you ask, people of, the older generation, their faith is all on Ayurveda.
Ayurveda, yeah.
Yes.
Because that is very ethno-pharmacological, kind of traditional. Traditionally, we follow that all over India, I think. And I think 80% of the global population also believes in that, not only in India, but then yes, Ayurveda and naturopathy, but they are not for the treatment. I guess it is more of a prophylactic or building your immunity strong.
Yes.
Of late, we have also witnessed that like the persons who are not in contact, they don't have any travel history, but they are also reported to be
positive.
Infected. Yeah, positive. So initially it was thought that weather or climate may play a role in the COVID, and the curve will be flattened and after a certain period of time, but this was also
not proved wrong.
Yeah. So now we can see that it's almost more than half of a year we have come, and still the cases are increasing only day by day.
Yes.
So it is a global dilemma situation for everyone, where everyone is trying to understand the behavior of the virus and the infection cause, how it progresses in the community.
But is Ayurveda, because our government is pro Ayurvedic products. So is it being recommended by the Pharmacy Council to push products from
that I am not, I think, an appropriate person to answer that, when we have president and vice president of PCI, also a panelist. So PCI as a pharmacy, because see, if allopathy is also not evidence-based in treatment, yet we don't have any perfect medicine for corona, right?
Yes.
Because this is the third in the row for such a flu virus, because SARS was there, MERS was there, and this is COVID. So this is almost 12 years, no, 18 years since 2002, when the first case of SARS was reported. But still, after 18 years, at a global level, we have failed to address this flu, especially. So there has to be certain technical or maybe biotechnological reasons for the behavior is so weird for this virus particularly. But coming back to your the main agenda of our webinar, Globinar, that dilemmas, the bioethical dilemmas that the pharmacists face. So there are so many of them, and pharmacists have really, up to 60% they have succeeded in addressing these issues. So I would like to give few examples. Like one protocol came to me for this eflornithine. Eflornithine is also somewhere reported for as a treatment for COVID.
Okay. Can you tell the participants what is the use of this drug? It's an off-label drug.
Ma'am, it is a US FDA approved drug.
Yes.
And it is actually used for getting the treatment of the facial hair on women.
Okay, for facial.
Yeah,
okay.
And it is available for the topical application.
Okay.
But then there was some off-label use that indicated that it can be treatment for coronavirus also. So we received a protocol for that. Companies are trying whatever, and okay, there were some clinical studies, and based on those clinical studies, and since our government is now realized all over the world, fast track approvals for this or for the clinical trials is already in line. I mean, they are not objecting too much for that. So we had cleared, but then again, this time in last 4 months, I received 6 protocols for clinical research, and one was this one that was specifically for COVID thing. But then our concern was that whatever the volunteers they'll be going to recruiting, what is the COVID history for them, whether and how they will tackle them, because they were using this thermal screening, and even the PCR testing or whatever, that is also not available, and we need to, there was also no any guidelines from CDSCO to address the COVID testing before recruiting the volunteers, what is to be done, what is not to be done. There is no criteria as of now available, and what will happen, what will be the compensation guidelines. Suppose during the infection, there may be some asymptomatic volunteer and somebody may come out with a COVID infection, or what is to be done in that situation. So it was really very, very tough decision that we had to take. Because
okay, I think Dr. Richa, I think Dr. Nandini is here from ex-ICMR, so we may address that question to her regarding the research and the guidelines.
Yeah.
No, continue, because I just wanted you to know that I think Madam is there.
So because for one drug, we cannot stop, or we cannot, suspend the research for all other drugs. Then pharmacists were also the first line of response that was available to the common public or community. Because doctors, they were busy. Most of the doctors were not working, and the whole team was concentrating on addressing the heavy load of COVID patients only. They were also working with a shortage of staff. And so the immediate response that was available to the community, that is available to the community, is to the pharmacist. So counseling by the pharmacist is very, very important role that a pharmacist has played during the whole of this pandemic. And I would also like to mention some few of the very, very important aspects that is of dilemma. I'm not advocating any, but I'm just putting forth these issues like addiction cases, withdrawal symptoms. Then also people are going to the pharmacies to for getting either the medication or whatever.
Yeah.
Then contraceptive devices, contraceptive pills, MTP kits, pre-deceased people for their regular supply of medicines. That was also, the pharmacist was really in a fix, because they may have a COVID infection, and we are not able to
I think this issue, people forget that even pharmacists are exposed to infection, and that it's not only the doctors and the nurses and the hospital settings only, but even the pharmacists are exposed. So that is especially when we're talking about community pharmacists.
Yeah, and then there is a sort of mental stress also, because in India, you know what kind of setup we are having in India for a pharmacy.
Yes,
they are very, very accessible.
Yes.
So people are frustrated because of the lockdown, and they are in a behavior of aggression also many times. If the pharmacist
we witnessed this when the lockdown was declared and everybody rushing to the pharmacy. There was a lot of fights happening outside the pharmacy because everybody wanted to get their medication, everybody wanted to get their masks, and all that. So we've witnessed this in India, and I think the bottom line is pharmacists also their concerns also needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and the government also should, I would like to present a point over here, that the government or the regulatory authorities should also, I don't know, it missed or what, but there was not any support that was available to the community pharmacist or the protective gears or the mask or whatever.
Yeah, so I think generally when we're talking about it's the health force, that government support is very essential at this stage.
Essential,
because but then we are seeing
and even proper use of mask, proper use of mask. Everybody was hunting for N95.
Yes, there was a shortage of N95 also in India, and then later on, of course, the various guidelines came. What are the different uses of the mask?
And we in India have witnessed many versions of N95.
Yes, we are good at that. So that is that is good. Dr. Richa, I want to, because we are running short of time, I want to bring out the issue of this study. I'm not sure how many of you on the panelists. I will take a general opinion. There is a study that is going on. On May 6th, WHO had released a study which was regarding the COVID challenge. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, where they're recruiting patients, people now for, they are directly being infected with the virus, so that they can study about, what does this virus do? Now, I want you all to address this issue about the ethical issues, recruiting participants to the COVID challenge study. And these volunteers, are being exposed to the disease. What is your opinion? Richa, I'll start with you, Dr. Richa, and then I'll go to the others.
Yeah, it is like, ma'am, in my opinion, it is like choosing between bad and worse. So it was also a point of discussion or concern that how much it is ethical or justified to infect a healthy individual with the virus to test the efficacy of the virus.
Yes. Okay.
So but then there is a risk-benefit assessment. Yeah, risk-benefit assessment that needs to be done, and the recruiters have all the clinical research is governed under the basic principles of bioethics. So they are educated, they are told, they are informed.
So what is your opinion? What is your opinion on this?
Ma'am, this I would not specifically with respect to COVID, but for each and every medicine, and any research, this issue exists.
So you're okay with, you're saying the research?
Yeah, because they have autonomy is there, na?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Timothy. Your opinion on this? The COVID challenge. The WHO has is recruiting participants to be.
Yeah, the human. It's called the Human Challenge. On May 6th, the WHO gave a release that it was after a lot of ethicists were consulted. They've said the Human Challenge for COVID is now acceptable and ethical.
It's open, and the research perspective. Professor Timothy, your opinion.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm not aware of the specific details of this, the COVID-19 specific challenge. But if I understand it correctly, and people are being infected
volunteers.
With the
infected with the virus.
With the virus, then there should be all of the same principles and processes which apply to any Human Ethics Committee approved research. So there must be a stated.
Let me just put a point to you. We are at a situation where people have no work. They have no, ways of earning their living. And this may be one of the ways to, earn a living. Your point, Professor.
I think this is a very complex issue and a very significant issue. I think if something like this is to be supported, then for sure there needs to be really a significantly informed consumer in this process, because clearly it's not without significant risk in a proportion of individuals. For a proportion of individuals, maybe the symptoms experienced of COVID-19 might not be yet too severe, but for some proportion of individuals, it could be the worst possible outcome for them.
Your yes, no. I won't allow you to sit on the fence. I think it's a no. I won't allow you to sit on the fence.
I think it's a no.
It's a no.
I think it's a no. It's a no.
Well, the issue, I guess, what Dr. Mary was, the human, these are healthy volunteers, right? And they're going to use informed consent. But they are, if you are without a job and without money, this is of course you get paid. So you're likely to attract, even with the consent, the lower socioeconomic, or in some countries, the racial equality, all these issues. So that's what we were looking at. That's why the WHO came out with this after having ethicists consulted in terms of the vaccine for COVID. They put this out. So I think, Dr. May, we are trying to just get an understanding.
Yeah, let me get in. Professor Henry, your opinion. No sitting on the fence. I won't allow anyone to sit on the fence.
I'm a member of the National Committee for Clinical Research in Portugal, so I'm very sensitive to this. What you mentioned, that is correct. If a person needs money, there is a reason to go. But this is what happens with every clinical trial. There are no clinical trials without risk. So what is important is to be sure that informed consent is there, and the conditions are created to avoid that people can take the risk just because they need money. For instance, in my country, is forbidden to pay people to enter in clinical trials, but there is not the same in all world. What is important is to be sure that all the ethical principles are. I don't know the study yet, but I'm sure. I tend to believe that this study can only be approved after an ethical committee to be sure that all the ethical principles are there. So
you're okay. Yes.
I'm okay. If this is not meted, I'm against.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Professor Henry. Your views from USA.
Well, my views, I think, are quite similar to Professor Felipe's. I would say yes. However, all ethical guidelines for clinical research in human subjects must be followed. And the patient must be fully informed, they must be fully volunteers, and they must fully understand all of the risks associated with the trial. I think it's important because we wouldn't get anywhere in the advancement of medicine if we didn't have willing volunteers. And I believe the work that's been done the last several decades to protect human subjects in research should allow us a good clinical trial.
All right, thank you, Professor. Professor Mahindra from UK. After all, smallpox vaccine was discovered that way. You inject the virus and you got the vaccine. What is your opinion, Professor? Please unmute yourself.
I very much like Professor Hal to have a declaration of interest because I do work with the division of the National Institute for Health Research for my region as a pharmacy champion. And I'm actively supporting engagement into trials and studies, etc. One of the key parts is that I mean, Professor Henry has also touched on it. I can see Tim's reservation, Professor Chen there. We have to absolutely be sure that the person consenting, it's all right saying we've received informed consent, but do they actually understand what they're consenting to? And I think that could have a huge difference in terms of how people feel. I think whilst we try to make it clear as possible, in our minds, we think we've been very fair. There is a payment. We don't know if it's going to be effective on you. We don't know if they interact, but how well do they understand that? And I think until we do not get that point across vividly, clearly, and in a manner that the different communities and organizations, the public and patients understand, then I think becomes unethical, particularly with a payment attached to it. Having said that, you're absolutely right. Without the studies and without the trials and without people engaging, we're not going to get too far forward, really. So in the UK, I have highlighted this, and one of the things I'm championing, particularly within the minority ethnic groups, where there's a reluctance in relative terms to take part in research and trials, is how do we get them on board better? But we have to give the same message that we would for everybody else as well. But is there understand? So there's a cultural belief here that we don't want to engage in the vaccine. But then there's some pockets will say, well, actually, there's a vaccine going, let's go for it. So it's how well informed they are. So in answer to your question, providing the person taking part is absolutely sure what they're taking part in is and what it entails, then I'm an advocate of that.
Because Professor, this is not, we are injecting virus. It's a live virus. And
Exactly.
it's not a vaccine. So
no, but even in the vaccines, so I'm talking vaccines, virus, the principle becomes the same, that we need to inform, they need to know the risks properly. Do they understand the risks rather than saying, well, these are the risks, but this is what could happen, and please sign a new. We need to be sure in our own mind from an ethical perspective that they understand the full implications of the virus being injected into them.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Mary, can I? What you're saying is right, Mahendra. Good informed consent, but there is. I was just reading the non-governmental organization called the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition. They have cautioned that because there's the pandemic, people are without jobs, money shut. A special socioeconomic group, whether they like it or not, are driven to take this. So you will get a biased group who are dependent on money, even though they don't want, they need the money. So that is a caution, and I think that makes some sense, isn't it? Even if we give good conform, if they know what they're doing, but poverty or lack of a job and money can take you to that day. So that's a sort of caution. I think that's something that Dr. Mary we were trying to see the risks and benefits, but also the biases and the situation that COVID has brought. The pandemic has brought, in the current normal situation, it might not be as extenuated as in the current, where people are without jobs and without money and looking for some help. And so that's the thing there. Yeah, thank you.
But Professor Russell, the payment side of it could mask actually their understanding, and that's where I have a slight dilemma about this, because the payment becomes, in some cases, an inducement so heavily that they become masked in their own judgment. And that's why I feel I would really like to endorse and emphasize that for me, it's important that they understand everything that they're going into, but then the payment could be following as a result.
I would like to say over here that most of the clinical trials are not able to complete because of the drop in volunteer numbers. So this is why, so this is also one fact.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Richa. Professor Pierre, I'd like to get you in. There is a question from Miriam Vogora. We are talking about the COVID challenge, the virus challenge that WHO has said of infecting volunteers with the virus. There is a question from Miriam Bogoro. She says, we need to ask the researchers if they would be willing to be a part of the participants. What is your opinion on that?
This is right. And as we know, we have international guidelines on this field from the UNESCO, from SIOMS, from the World Medical Association and so on, from WHO. And the problem is in Africa is that we firstly need a comprehensive field of guidelines, African guidelines. That's what we're working on that.
Okay.
Because some countries have good guidelines, Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and so on, but others do not have at all. And Africa is not yet considered as a whole. When you have trials, you can go to Kenya or to Cameroon. It's not the same the same rules. We need to harmonize the guidelines, and we'll have a meeting next April at African Union, Addis Ababa, for that. And we need also a strong survey, because in our countries, we are facing a lot of problems with the non-respect of the rules in this field. And there is a huge work to do in South Africa and also at international level to solve this problem. It's really a big problem.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Pierre. I'd like to get in Dr. Achoka.
Yes.
Sorry,
So thank you, Prof. Yeah, so for me, it's pretty simple. We've been doing this in our country for quite a while now. We've been doing this for malaria. You know, the strain of malaria that we have in Kenya is one of the worst strains in the world. So we've been doing this for malaria. We've been doing this for HIV, not using this kind of method, but we've been doing human trials. And these randomized trials, I kind of got used to them. This is a very personal opinion, but what is key and very key is informed consent.
Yes.
I know in the past, we've been having some of these trials being done locally by Walter Reed, Wellcome Trust. Okay, maybe it's not proper to mention the organizations on the forum, but through the Kenya Medical Research Institute, which is a very robust organization in the country, we've been able to do these trials. The only issue would be at times is how this information is also disseminated to the public.
Okay.
Well, initially there were reports on the BBC that similar trials are to be done here, but like Professor Pierre said, there was major pushback on this, and the reason was that it was thought that they would want to experiment on Africans and not on the European
underdeveloped countries.
Yes, so it was more of a general an assumption of sorts, which also plays into the psyche of how people would receive the vaccine if at all it was to be developed. They would think that it's, this thing was, there might be major pushback on that. So I think how the information is disseminated, how it's passed down to the masses is also very key, and informed consent again, very key.
Yes, thank you, Professor Ashok. Because the issue of any trial in underdeveloped or developing countries is a big everything is global.
Big issue, yes.
Yes.
Big issue.
Yes, right. Thank you. I'll bring in Dr. Shailendra. Dr. Shailendra, please unmute yourself. I think you're muted again. You're muted again, Professor.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So my take is you should go ahead with the trials.
Okay.
Because we have to take into consideration certain the spike is going very fast There were cases 300,000 per month, per week, and now per day. And
Okay.
the society has witnessed big wars were fought to restore peace. So there are sometimes, in order to restore the peace, there were wars, and there should not be overload of anything. Whenever there are wars, and all are we concerned about the ethical practices and all that, but we have to remember the interpretation of law is above the law, because interpretation is always contemporary. In order to keep the ball
Professor
rolling, in order
Shailendra,
to serve
Professor
society,
Shailendra, you're talking about
yeah, this WHO this
study.
study. So
Okay.
we should go ahead with such type of experiment based on certain issues. We cannot stop the search of some new drugs and molecules, because this is the reason why we are having more than India and China having more than 50% almost the population, and there are no clinical trials are carried out in this particular reason. And we have lot of phenotype genotype population, and if we are really worried about this type of issues, so we will not be able to find out good drugs and good candidate drugs. So we should go ahead, but at the same time, this is the
Caution.
responsibility of us to maintain, to follow the guidelines, ethical guidance, and read between the lines as well.
Okay, all
This is
right.
my
Thank you, Professor Shailendra. I'm just going to wind up with vaccine, the issue of vaccines now. Issue of vaccines in India, Professor Shailendra. Your take on it, because right now we have about 4 vaccines that are being produced in India.
So we are just we can talk about the candidate of drugs, but wherever whosoever is developing the vaccine, it must be manufactured in this country. And you just see the capacity, the different Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute of India, they have arranged all sort of raw material. They are not sure what type of the formulation must be there. So they have this arranged all sort of formulations, packing and material. So whosoever, we are very much sure that we must have our own indigenous vaccine as well. But anybody is produced in developing, it must be produced from this country. And
should be produced in
philanthropic
India, you're saying,
approaches.
You're saying India,
Yes,
Professor?
yes, must be. Yes, yes, India, about India.
Okay, no, it
so
must
if
be.
It is developed outside India also, because Oxford, they have tie-up with Bharat Technology. Others also, they have for the manufacturing and scale up, they have tie-up with Indian industry. At the same time, 4 vaccines are candidate, and for fast track development, the DCGI has given the permission also.
Okay, right. Thank you, Professor Shailendra. Professor Timothy, Australia has just started vaccine, if I'm not mistaken. They've just started the first stage of vaccine trials. Your opinion?
That's right. I think there is some research being undertaken in Australia, which is currently undergoing phase 1 safety trials in relation to vaccine use. I think if we look more globally in relation to the vaccine research, my understanding is that there are more than 100 groups across the world developing vaccinations. I think if we're thinking about the global scale, we would need multiple of those vaccines to be shown to be both safe and efficacious and scalable by the pharma, if we're going to actually arrive at a good health situation for the global population.
What are the ethical issues that you're going to, face if a vaccine is out?
Well, I think the critical ethical issues are who has access and at what cost for these vaccines, and so the basis on which the vaccines are available to all members of the global population is going to be a significant challenge, especially if some cohorts, some groups of people are not able to access the vaccine because of prohibitive prices.
Yes.
I think it should be done on a needs basis using the principle, I guess, is equity. So the people who need the vaccine most should be the first to get it, not necessarily the people with the greatest disposable income.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Helder?
I agree completely, and I'd like to add something. I think this issue about vaccines shows something. We are facing a pandemic, so we have work all together, and I think that this decision should be global, involving international organizations and so on, in order to have a number of commitments that avoid that a country can have all the production of a vaccine or a medicine and so on. So I think that we have to push for international agreements and commitments in order to in order to give conditions for the ones that are in need and not for the ones that can pay. And I think that is an ethical issue as well. And all of us, we have to work together on this direction very urgently. And after that, I finish. Another important thing, and I think that the pharmacists can have an important role as well, is on the quality of the news, of the information. We are facing a number of information that is of low quality and is making people very anxious. And I think that as a professionals, we have this obligation to try to give the right information and help people to choose what is right and what is rubbish.
Yes, thank you. That is very important, actually. Information about drugs, which people, they're getting it on the internet, they're getting it on Google, and,
even in newspapers and on TV.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Professor. Professor Pierre, from Cameroon, perspective on vaccine?
Well, we are waiting for the vaccine.
Okay.
But and concerning clinical trials, I know that some African countries are part of the trial with Oxford University, especially South Africa.
Okay.
We have also a few countries who are trying to work with other groups. From the African CDC, CDC for Africa at African Union, they said that we have about 200 projects of vaccine in Africa.
Okay. That's good to hear.
I don't have details.
Yes,
we're waiting for the result.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor.
What happens because we need a vaccine very quickly, because we need, is there issues about fast tracking? Because we're hearing about fast tracking.
I'll give you very few points.
Is that right? We have fast tracking taking place to bring the vaccine quickly. Is that, are there any ethical issues you think around that?
Yeah. Oh, the question is directed to
anyone. Professor.
Anyone. All the panel.
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely. Fast tracking it brings into play quite a number of issues, like establishing the carcinogenicity. Those are things which we take time. So how are they going about that? Because we need like at least we have to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 methodically, and that's why it's always been that way. That's why that's the template. So running all of it at once again brings into question the risk that we are actually exposing these patients to. So this might mean probably this must be approached.
Who do you think should get the vaccine first?
Once it's developed and found to be safe in humans.
Yes.
The ones who need it the most.
That is?
The most exposed.
that is the healthcare workers?
Yes, okay. We'll start probably with the elderly healthcare workers, maybe. That would be a good place to start.
So we need to have guidelines for that, because that's very important to remember, because we have to think about it now. We can't wait till the vaccine is out and then make a guideline. So I think we all have to, kind of think about these guidelines when a vaccine comes out. That is very important.
Yeah, we should work on the demographics, probably start with age, maybe illnesses, that kind of issue, and work it out, yeah.
Thank you very much. Professor Mahindra, 2 vaccines in UK are already phase 3.
Yeah, so if the situation in the UK, obviously we've got the Oxford trial coming through. And
Imperial
we're now
College
very
too.
optimistic.
I think Imperial College too.
Yeah, and Imperial.
Yeah.
And others are coming through as well. But we're now very optimistic. But I'm still, from an ethical perspective, cautious about, we talked about fast tracking. We should not be skipping any loops here, really. This is a patient safety that is paramount. And as a healthcare professional, I would always put the patient first. And I'm wondering, we don't have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 just because we like to put things in place. And yet suddenly we're trying to remove some of the obstacles, the barriers, so that we can get this out. Is that a knee-jerk reaction? I ask myself the question. So if I personally was going to engage in that, I would want to, as an informed person, I would still want more information as somebody who's learned. How about the ordinary public on the street? And that brings another point to me here that I would like to put forward, is that the community pharmacists and pharmacists in general have a key role to play in terms of education of our communities, the public that we engage with, in terms of the risks behind this, the benefits behind this.
Professor Helder was saying, that the role of pharmacists, community pharmacists, in providing information regarding, medication.
That's exactly right. So what I've been doing here, we've been reaching out to communities. The pharmacists are going out and working with the communities, so that this is another avenue of providing more and more information so that they become more informed. If you look at some of the myths, particularly places, not just in India, but other countries worldwide have their own myths and beliefs. And
because you do have a group of anti-vaccine, people who are anti-vaccine. So that is something we have to, think about.
And that's where the upskilling, perhaps this is where the pharmacy workforce could be utilized better, so that we can actually help to dispel some of the myths that are around, and using the different channels that we work on, the radio channels, the television channels, all those things could be a key fact in how we get to this. In terms of fast tracking, one of my passions is the health inequalities that we have. And I would want to be mindful that by fast tracking, we don't increase the gap and the health inequalities within the different countries that we have, really, because we could be liable to that. So fast tracking, it's got to be equitable. It's not just the person who are able to pay as well, because that would widen the inequality. And I think the other fact is, we were talking from the professor who said, you were asking, how do we prioritize and categorize? Well, I think you've got to start off with the elderly, the multimorbidity patients as well, people who are key workers, and we have to go through those lines, really. Perhaps even potentially.
Professor Mahindra, we had a talk on when Taiwan came in, when this COVID series started in, and they had guidelines in place. Everything was because they were exposed to the SARS very badly. So they had systems in place and guidelines in place as to who gets the ventilator first,
Yeah.
And they had a protocol in place. And I think that it's very important now, instead of waiting for the vaccine to come out, to get a guideline in place now itself, so that we don't have to think about it, after the vaccine is out.
I'm absolutely in agreement with you that we should not be reactive, we should be proactive.
Yes.
And this is a perfect platform to set that set the standards and the goals moving forward, really. So
yes, right.
I would be a big advocate about being proactive, because we have been reactive for too long, and look at the costs to lives and the health of people, really.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Professor. I'd like to go to Dr. Richa. Professor Richa, can you unmute yourself? ICMR,
Yes, ma'am.
Because we have a vaccine claimed by the ICMR that it's going to come out very soon. What is your, are they fast tracking it, or is that, what is your opinion? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. All the clinical research in the backdrop of COVID is fast tracked only. And we are also eagerly waiting.
Okay, so you feel because they're saying by August we should get the vaccine. Is it possible?
How can it be possible by August?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it will be around January 21.
Okay, January 2021. Okay, right.
That is my guess, but they may have an extraordinary speed and extraordinary fast tracking. So,
okay. So I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get into the political issues of all this.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to thank all of you because I'm just going to round up your last thoughts. Dr. Richa, I'll start with you because you're already there.
Yes,
how do we move forward now? We have spoken that we've said the place of pharmacy practice is very important. And they should be acknowledged in the healthcare workforce. How can we take this forward and make your presence felt, you know?
Ma'am, first of all, we should realize the fact that we appreciate the fact that pharmacists have now been well appreciated in the society and in the community as well for their services. Earlier, it was just like the pharmacists are for manufacturing the medicines, but now various domains of their activity has been brought into the limelight, and now they are accepted and accommodated also. And we need certain guidelines and protocols because these type of pandemic, the frequency is increasing from our past experience. So we definitely need the protocols for the use, for the triage, for the management, for the prophylactic, for the means we can have for the viral infections, for the bacterial infections, for the parasitic, like that we can categorize. And
yeah,
if
but
the
as of now
regulatory bodies
for COVID-19, we need to take a stand.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely, the regulators should actually, first of all, for the management and for the triage, that is very, very important. Triage with respect to the vaccination also, with respect to the management in the hospital also, because otherwise, a lot of allegations are invited.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is Professor Henry there, or have we lost him totally? Professor Henry Manasseh is there, or we've because
I just saw him. I think he's.
Is he there?
I think he's offline now.
He's offline. Okay. All right. Professor Chen, we are winding up. Your last two thoughts on the role of pharmacists or pharmacy practice.
Thank you very much. I think my last two thoughts, pharmacists should be key members of multidisciplinary teams. And in being key members of multidisciplinary teams, they must be practicing evidence-based medicine. This is in terms of the advice they're giving and their actual practice. The goal of the pharmacist really should be for the benefit of the patient with respect to the safe and efficacious use of these medicines. These are core principles for the profession of pharmacy, which I think is central, especially in a time of pandemic like COVID-19. Thank you very much for the opportunity to.
Thank you. Thank you. That was short and sweet. Professor Pierre, last thoughts on pharmacy practice and how to move forward. Professor Pierre?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Your last thoughts.
At the level of Africa, we are working with the national societies of pharmacists, have a continental platform, joined with the continental platform of physicians and nurses and so on, all the health professionals, to have a platform of discussion on all the issues of public health.
Yes.
And we hope that through this platform, we'll be able to have a good dialogue all the issues. So this is the setting of a platform.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Pierre. Professor Helder, last two thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. It was very, very interesting. And I think that pharmacists shown the role in this crisis. And that's still, the crisis still. So it's important to use this experience and this evidence to show the politicians that pharmacists can do more that they are doing, but they need to be recognized for that, recognized in every dimension. So I think that the pharmaceutical organizations have now a role to play in order to show how pharmacists can help to increase and to increase the quality of the health system. So it's on our hands to show that and to give the step forward.
Thank you, Professor Helder. I also like the fact that you said pharmacists should be the ones who have to provide the correct information to the public, and that's very important. Yeah, thank you, Professor Mahindra. Last two thoughts, please. I'm sorry, I have to cut everyone short.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed the discussion and debate. Very important. I think this platform has a clear setting in terms of developing some guidelines for the vaccinations and who it's for and how we can actually stage that and making sure that it becomes equitable. I think that's a key part, so that we don't widen these inequalities that we see globally within the different countries throughout the world. I also feel, I know it's 2 points, but one thing that we haven't mentioned is that we need to start looking at the curriculum as well, the early curriculum.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring in the curriculum because we are running short of time.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that, so perhaps that needs to be, I just want to park that thought that becomes key in terms of lifting the wider agenda forward. And I also feel that the pharmacist has, and it's something that we're doing, and I'm really driving this forward in the UK, and I'll possibly send you some links across, is the working with the community so that you can help them to understand the situation better, help them to manage the situation, but also not to forget about their other long-term conditions that they've been keeping behind and not getting access and treatment to. So I think that, so for example, it could be that they could be harboring, let's say they've got some blood in the urine, for example, and they've kept it back and not seen because they've been scared. That becomes, so there's a wider aspect to this as well, really, where we need to manage that, but the pharmacist has a clear role. And the final part is we need to understand what we do. We need others to understand what we do, and we need to understand what they do. That becomes a fit for the multidisciplinary team, which is how this is going to move forward, really.
I think that is a very valid point. Being part of the multidisciplinary team and the rightful place of pharmacy practice in the healthcare system, that is very important. Thank you, Professor Mahindra.
Thank you very much.
Professor Ashoka, last two words.
Thank you for calling me professor once again.
No, I look at you and I see a professor in you, so I'm calling you professor.
Okay, this goes back to the first question that you asked me. I didn't get enough time to elaborate this, but you mentioned that the issue of prescribing rights. We're in a third world country, so our settings are a little bit different, probably from what's there in Portugal. Professor Helder said they don't want prescribing rights as pharmacists. But the first point of call to many patients in a third world country where we are trying to achieve UHC, that's universal health coverage, where healthcare is still something that is it's wanting. Yeah? So considering the wide network of community pharmacists in every village, in every town you'd go to, you definitely run into a pharmacist. Yes. So I think the pharmacist should be empowered.
Yes.
Should be empowered to carry out some basic clinical work, which they know they've been trained on. And I think this should be enshrined in law they should be allowed to do a little bit more than they are being limited to do right now.
Okay.
And my prayer is that this should come. We are working on it. We are looking at changing the legislations. We are working on the acts right now. And I'm hoping if this could be done, it would be able to assist a lot, even in the management of COVID patients during the early stages. If it was very clear on how we'd be able to do this. And also on a secondary issue, probably which I'd hoped to discuss during the panel, but it never came up, is due to the lockdown, a number of issues have arisen secondary to these lockdowns where we have these teenagers at home.
Yes, the issue of teenage pregnancy, you did mention it, yes.
Yeah. So we need to look at the ethical issues around it. And because what has come to the fore is that they should be given contraceptives on demand. And you're looking at issues like medroxyprogesterone, which now is being manufactured for self-administration. And the pharmacy channels push out these products into the market. So this is something I think we need to also, maybe in another forum, probably discuss and look at how some of these things should be regulated even from a pharma perspective.
Yes.
And I think that raises a serious bioethical issue. Which
yes, the thing is, let me tell you that probably Africa has an advantage because the COVID started a little later than other countries. So I think there is still a lot of chance for Africa to learn from what is happening and to, from the mistakes that happened in other parts of the world and, and not repeat the same mistakes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think I'll just wind up with Professor Shailendra. Professor.
Thank you, madam. And before I start my statement, it's my responsibility to thank Dr. Rachel and Dr. Mary for this nice webinar for focusing on pharmaceutical sciences. So my quick response is while the pharmacists were delivering their services at the bedside with the doctors, they were also working day and night in the industry setup. At the same time, they were dispensing medicines. At the same time, they were addressing the different drug molecule before the doctors as a medical representative. So they have performed on all walks of their profession. So they command the respect and they deserve it. My suggestion for this particular webinar to conclude is we have to recommend that the pharmacists should also be included in policy making. They should not be always the disease at the receiver's end. They should be policy makers. Number two, pharmacist and other healthcare profession needs to have the preliminary competence to tackle the problem of fear psychosis in the society. At present, they are too close in the society. It's a subject of Dr. Russell, but I am just encroaching because one group in the society, this is overloaded with the information under stress, and other is they are overloaded with the confusion. Whatever literature is available, this is only available in English, and no local language, no poster, no information is given in. So there is a need to address such issues. So we have to make sure that pharmacists also they are in the policy making. They are having the counseling competence, and the third and very important, at least during pandemic or in case of any emergency, they should have dispensing rights and at least identified drugs we can get list, and they should have a prescribing right. So this is my take out of this particular webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Shailendra. And it was, I'm sure all of you know that the issues are just too much for even a discussion like this, because we've already crossed more than 1.5 hours. We said, so we will stop here if we want. If Dr. Russell wants a webinar, feels that this should continue on a session 2, we can also go to a session 2 next time. But I thank all the panelists for your fruitful, for this deliberation and for the fruitful discussion that we had. I hope we can do something positive out of this. It is not just discussing, but taking forward and moving forward and, like Professor Dr. Shailendra said, is, be part of the policy making. That is important, because you all are the right people to address all these issues and make the problems known to the government. So I think it's very important that even at a political level, you should be active. And that's not only for pharmacy, that is even for doctors. I would say that even for doctors and other healthcare professionals. So thank you very much. It was really enjoyable. And thank you for your valuable time. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Russell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, all the
Dr.
experts.
Sorry, thank you, Dr. Mary. Thank you very much for that excellent moderation. We covered a lot. And as she said, like the other family therapy people, we went on to 2 sessions, but it looks that there's a lot to discuss, a lot to offer. And I think one important thing, one is, of course, I'm going to ask Mahendra about, with all of you, happy to be part of a publication of from this webinar and from this collaboration. I want this to be an opportunity. We set the platform where we have, Henry from United States, Mahendra, and we go right down to Africa, India, and Portugal, and so forth. And I think this might be a good way that we could have a platform to have some collaboration, discussion, and so forth. Another important, I would like to suggest to to all of you here, that like we've got with Dr. Shailendra, another way as part of the UNESCO chair in bioethics, the pharmacy program. We've got a big pharmacy program that was started. I am now going to ask you to be part of in the Department of Education. We have different groups, and I in the council. So I'm now wanting to have Mahendra he's been part of the education department. So I'm keen now to have the UNESCO program with pharmacy and extending it to probably to Helder and to Timothy. I mean, you're in the same place here with me, so I will give you the information. So we would have not just in one place, but we would have an international pharmacy bioethics program of the UNESCO chair. Is that reasonable to all our colleagues from Africa, from
yes?
So we'll take that forward. So I want to thank all of you, the distinguished panelists, and I'm very happy to see, even after Mary, it's not 1.5 hours, it's 2.5 hours. Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. But
I'm
I'm
so
very
sorry.
happy but you got to remember, it was so interesting. Even at this time, we have 140 people, our participants in the group. So it shows that pharmacy and what we had here is very important. The second thing is I wanted to acknowledge to Des Cahill. Professor Des Cahill he's here. He is from RMIT University, part of the Melbourne group unit of the UNESCO chair. He is preparing an executive summary. You will get what we do is the recordings, and it's all on our website. You'll have all the recordings with an executive summary, which Professor Des Cahill will produce after this. And so I want to acknowledge and thank him for his work here. And we will take this to having a publication. The other person I can see is Dr. Geeta Lakshmi. I just want to acknowledge Geeta Lakshmi in her time as the Vice Chancellor of the Tamil Nadu MGR University in 2018. She brought together Professor Suresh and so forth, and she is the head of the faculty development program there. Dr. Geeta, I want to acknowledge you, and maybe she initiated the pharmacy bioethics program, which now has a large program in India. So I just asked her to open her camera, and that's Dr. Geeta Lakshmi. we acknowledge your what you started as the Vice Chancellor. She had 123 pharmacy schools in her university, and she brought them into the curriculum and so forth, and acknowledge that. Is there anything you want to say before we finish, Dr. Geeta Lakshmi?
Yeah, just because in the today's was the platform for pharmacy people. Really, I wanted to tell that there was a talk on the Ayush and about the modern medicine, which I think so in future we have to integrate these kind of medicine to put into use so that we could get a wider kind of treatment and faster recovery period. So that is what I wanted to tell. And so it has to be integrated. And the second one, I want all the pharmacists to be associated with the clinician and not to separate themselves into the pharmacy or the shop or the pharmacy which exists in a hospital. So they always have to associate themselves during the clinical rounds and meet the clinicians each and every day to know what is the treatment protocol given to the patients in their ward or wherever they are practicing. So this I wanted to say for the pharmacist. And of course, in India, the medicines are in supply and there is no dearth of supply of medicines. And I also want the pharmacist in India to manufacture their own raw material and ingredients which are used to manufacture the tablets or injection or vaccines. So this is what I wanted to tell.
Thank you, Dr. Geeta Lakshmi. Dr. Geeta Lakshmi is a microbiologist. She's a microbiologist, but by discipline-wise, yes. So thank you all once again. Thank you, Dr. Geeta, and thank all of you. We'll be in touch with you, and if you all feel, we might continue the conversation on the role of the pharmacy in the front line in dealing with the pandemic, and probably come up with some guidelines that for the next epidemic we will all be prepared. And I think before going, I reiterate what Dr. Mary said. We had one of our second webinars, we had Taiwan, and we learned that they, in 29th of December, they already had everything there. They informed China about what was happening, and they had probably the lowest death. They had the best outcome, and they had everything protocol written from the SARS. They just rolled it out, and everything worked. And so it might be a good. We should come out from this with something like that, so we will be prepared for the future. So once again, thank you all. Lovely to have all of you on behalf of the UNESCO chair. Thank you all very much. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay well, and all the very best to you.
Thank you.
Before I finish, Derek, is there anything you want to say? I should have asked Professor Colonel Derek.
No, that's fine, sir. I just wanted to convey the deep appreciation of all the participants to whatever the panelists had to offer today. Very, very high standard of discussion, very practical oriented tips. And it was good to see that all across the world, may I say, that we are facing the same problems. We also had a parallel discussion on another forum about the good outcomes of COVID-19. And I think one of this, possibly what I observed from the participants' chat and from the discussion today, is that there is a tremendous need of empowering the complete pharmacy profession as a force multiplier to the medical profession. Dr. Geeta Lakshmi gave us a wonderful suggestion, and I hope each and every one of us sitting here takes up on that. The reason it was in the past, again, from personal experience coming from the dental profession, was each one of us were in different boxes, and somehow we all felt we could function together. But I'm glad that under the leadership of Dr. Russell, we are looking at this as healthcare professionals. No more just dental, medical, the old traditional way of thinking that we were used to. So possibly as an outcome of this entire COVID-19 scenario, we have possibly the top leaders all across the world who are here on this panel. So maybe you all can continue this discussion, take this up with your respective governments. I'm sure Dr. Russell is there to give you the international platform so that pharmacy as a profession can be recognized as integrated to the healthcare profession in real term basis. Get you all integrated as force multipliers so that as and when the future situation develops, we will not have to start from this of having to define ourselves. And another important point that came out from the chat was the various ethical aspects of the human challenge. I think a lot of the questions were answered. Of course, like a debate, we'll have people still here on either side of the fence. And one request, if we do continue this second part, may I request all our esteemed panelists to possibly collect references or whatever important articles that they can get, and we can post it on the chat, because that we have a lot of students who are there, a lot of faculty, and like Dr. Russell reminds us, each one of us is here as a co-learner. So we can always go back better informed, and whatever information we do collect, we shall collate it and circulate it to all of you subsequently with a recording of this, so that it works out as a good educational incentive or initiative from the UNESCO Chair, Department of Education. So thank you once again from the participants and from my own behalf. It was a wonderful discussion and feel very honored to be part of this evening discussion. Thank you, Dr. Russell, for your inspired leadership. And Dr. Mary, you just get better and better. So we keep repeating ourselves, but you do such a wonderful job. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russell, for including me there. Thank you. Thank you.
You started this, so it's important here.
All right.
And Dr. Sailendra Saraf has been leading this in India. I'm very glad, very happy. And Richa, all of them have been wonderful. So now we will have a bigger group. We will expand it to Australia, to Portugal, to UK, through the Department of Education of the UNESCO Chair. And Professor Kami has already written to me saying that this is I'll send you, that's the head and chair. He said that this is an important discipline that should be there with the UNESCO chair. So I'm I'm glad that I brought this all together. So we will continue the conversation and let it get deeper and so forth. So thank you all once again, and we'll meet again. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye, and thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Hey.
Bye, Professor Ashoka.
Professor.
I'll make it out for that. I'll do that. Yeah.
Good night, all. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night. Tim, good night to you.
Okay.
Congratulations, Dr. Achoka.
Thank you.